really do believe that if God was to come and tell you that you're going to be a millionaire, or you're going to be the biggest artist there is in Zimbabwe, or whatever it is that he's going to tell you, there's a whole journey there that if he told you about that journey, you'd say no, because that's going to be hard. You're going to be, say, if you're going to be in the creative industry, you will have moments where you're broke.
Yeah.
You're going to have moments where you're completely unsure and you're questioning each and everything that you're doing. You're going to have moments where family and friends are looking at you and saying, look, are you serious? You need to be serious with your life. And to be honest, I now see results now. This is from, let's say, 2016. How many years has it been now?
Hello, welcome back to another episode of Capture the Thoughts. On this episode, we have yet another awesome guest, Merilyn Mushakwe, who is an artist, a curator, and communications manager, and has worked with several art galleries. Hi, Merilyn. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So, we know you're very much into the art space. What fuels your passion for art?
I don't know how to answer that. Let's see. What fuels my passion? I don't know if necessarily I could say there's something outside of myself that does that. Because I feel like art is a part of me. As with most artists, I believe. It's very difficult to allow it or to have it be something that comes from the outside. Because literally by the mere fact that you were born and you gravitate towards that makes that a passion that is just set within you. So yeah, I think that's how I would respond to that. I have seen people who, I literally know of people who went into other fields that are not necessarily art related, but are artistically inclined, and they always find their way there. They will either sort of like have their job that no one even knows about sometimes. And then they spend all their time doing artsy things. I know of someone who was literally depressed at their work because they had this thing that they just needed to fulfill until they eventually left their job and got back into art or got into art. So I think like that's how best I can explain it. It's almost inexplicable in the sense that it just is, and it just requires some sort of expression and outward something. It just needs to get out. So I think that's the best way I can explain what that passion is. And then of course the more you consume, the more you see, the more that you do, the more that you want to belong in certain spaces. So everything about you ends up being an expression of this thing that is within you. So whether it's the people that you surround yourself with or the style that you even have, because I'm pretty sure that most people would look at me and sort of like just know. As with most artists, you look at them and you just know, you know,
that this person is artsy.
You know, they might not all have the same look. You can tell.
You can tell,
yeah.
You can tell. I know.
Yeah.
I believe that.
Yeah.
That's good. And so, tell us a bit more about yourself, about your background, your upbringing, about the person behind the artist.
Sure. Okay. So my background, my upbringing, I'm from a family of 4, so I have 2 younger brothers, and my mom's in the picture, my dad is not. We grew up in a pretty, regular household as far as I can tell. We were Catholic, or rather my mom was Catholic, and we used to go to Catholic church until I was about in grade 5, not 5 years old, rather, in grade 5. And something then happened, I'm not too sure what happened with her, but then she moved us from Catholic church and started going to Faith Ministries, which is like a Pentecostal church. And then I grew up in Faith Ministries. I literally was in Faith Ministries church till I went off to university. And so my first 2 years there, I don't know what I was doing. I was just fumbling and bumbling and mumbling about at university. It was an interesting space because I was, in as much as I'd technically grown up now in this Christian household, this Pentecostal Christian household, I now was in a space where I could take a step back from what I had thought of myself and just reevaluate and decide if this really was who I was. So not only did I go to this church, I also went to a Christian school, Gateway. And so everything about Gateway is Christian. So whether it's literally within, say, your lessons or your teachers or even as a leader, you practice what they call, well, you would know because you were at Gateway.
Yes, I was.
You know, servant leadership.
Yes.
Servant leadership, you know, which is like, you know, an example that was given by Jesus. So literally everything about my life, because you spend Monday to Friday at school, sometimes Saturdays because you've got sports or whatever else, and then on Sunday you've got church. And so I got out of that space, and it was a time for me to just see what the rest of the world had. And the world had very interesting things which I was seen on TV or just not known at all. So all of a sudden I studied art, by the way, fine arts. So I'm doing this art degree with these people who have ideas that I've never heard about. I am learning about people who believe in Mother Gaia or the third eye or all these things. Wow. I'm just like, what is this? It was also interesting. So for a very long time, I just didn't bother with church because I was just like, I'm not even sure what this is exactly, even though I'd felt like I was completely convicted of my Christian walk, but I'd never been confronted with everything else that existed outside of it. I now understand it was a very sheltered life that I led. I mean, which is understandable, as with, you know, most middle class, you know, type of people.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my first year and second year. And eventually within maybe end of second year, going into my third year, I had so many questions. As you would imagine, an art degree doesn't just teach you how to draw and paint. As a matter of fact, it hardly teaches you how to draw and paint. I never learned how to draw and paint in art school. I actually didn't. They are pushing you towards thinking in a certain way.
Opening your mind,
exactly. Yeah. So everything is conceptualized. Even your art is conceptual. So yes, you might draw very well, which I did, but I never got a chance to actually put that necessarily into effect. It was just an exploration of everything else. And I had so many questions because now all of a sudden I'm learning about how Christianity came to Africa. I'm learning about how it is used in certain spaces. And this bubble that I lived in as a Christian person, child, young woman, it wasn't necessarily burst, but I think like it now had tiny pinpricks in it. And I had so many questions. And so during orientation, it must have been the beginning of my third year, I come across this desk, and that belonged to the Student Christian Organization for my university. I was at Wits University in Joburg. And they had pretty interesting programs, it seemed. So they had a program where they brought in apologetics, which are, I suppose in a simple way, like defenders of the Christian faith. And so they said, come through, because you have so many questions, and just have a chat with them. So I did. So I'd go to these lectures that they had, these talks, and I'd listen, and I'd send them these long emails afterwards. Say, well, you said this, and you said this, and I want to understand that. And I had a lot of my questions answered, because I think I was looking, because I understood that there was some presence or entity that was greater than us. Yeah. It's not like I had just decided that nothing exists and I've become atheist. No, I just wanted to understand what that thing actually was. And so after some weeks of discussions and back and forth and trying to understand, I actually came to the conclusion that the Christian God actually made sense in a tangible way outside of faith. Because you ask people like, well, okay, all these difficult questions, they say, oh, you have to have faith. I'm like, yeah, no, that's not going to help me. I want to actually understand, because I'm a person who's very curious and smart. I believe I'm smart, and I want to know. I want to understand. Of course, there's certain things about the Christian walk that do need faith, that will require more than what you see. But I do think that what you see, or the arguments, also need to make sense at the end of the day. You can't just tell someone to believe. We need to tangibly see or learn or understand certain things. So, yeah, and then that was that. If I remember, what was your question? Just tell me about
your background and, your upbringing, which you have highlighted very well.
There we go, yeah.
he did an excellent job of that. And just to go into your maybe rediscovering, was it a process of rediscovering your faith, right? Your relationship with God. What I'm gleaning is that before it was more of okay, my family believes in this, so I have to believe, not necessarily have to, but this is what it is.
Well, it's a combination because it was my family believes in this, and all the people I know also believe in this because I was at a Christian school at the same time, so everybody and everything around me believes in this thing, and I thought I did, and I suppose I did because I read the word, all of everything. I was baptized in not just like physical baptism in water, but I received the Holy Spirit. I was there. I understood, quote unquote, everything until I got to a place of questioning things. So in as much as you believe and understand and see certain things, when you're confronted with something else, if you haven't fully gotten convicted of something, or I don't know, I feel like knowing that there are other things helps because it allows you to be solid within your walk. So if someone comes through later and they ask silly questions like, but you've never seen God or whatnot, then even if you may not be able to fully explain it, you're so convicted in it that it doesn't matter that this person is coming to tell you all of these things. And that's what that was for me. That's what that was. I do believe that was important for me. I needed to be outside of home. I needed to see the world. I needed to meet different people. I needed to express myself outside of what I had known myself to be at church and at school. I needed that. So when I did rededicate my life to Christ, it was with the understanding that, this is it. There's no one's going to come and tell me about universe juice and things along those lines, and I'm going to be like, let's go. No, that's not going to happen. I'm able to see through certain conversations when people say, manifest your things by telling it to the universe, and you're like, no, come on, that's you are just taking this absolutely beautiful thing, this relationship with God, and trying to water it down to the universe as if it's like a non-entity type of entity, and speaking things. All you've done is you've almost bastardized a relationship with God.
You've perverted it.
By doing certain things. All of a sudden, certain books that I've read, I'm looking at them different. There's a certain author that I liked. Paulo Coelho.
The Alchemist.
And it was very interesting because I actually then remember looking back at certain stories that I've read of him and thinking, this is absolutely unnecessary. Half of the things that people talk about are unnecessary because the quests that people go on, whether it's the characters in his books or even other stories or other texts that you read, these people are on a quest to find God, and they're not aware that that's what they're doing. They realize that there's a hole within them that needs to be filled. So they go on these journeys. They go to mountains. They do all these things. They travel around the world, and sometimes they reach some sort of conclusion. But you're reading this as someone who knows what it is to have a relationship with God, a fulfillment that goes beyond an understanding, and you're aware that no. That's what's missing there. That's a Jesus hole that's missing there, and that's why this person has gone on a journey for 10, 15 years and has, spent some time with Buddhists in whatever mountains, and they've gone there, and all they needed to do was to develop this with Christ, and that's all. You don't even need to visit a sacred temple somewhere in order for you to have that relationship, which is what I also love, or what I understood and loved about the Christian God. The walk wasn't some obscure thing. You didn't have to go visit somewhere in order for you to have a relationship. It didn't need an outside person to come and help you, or an outside facility to come and help you. This could literally happen as you're sitting in your room, or as you're taking a walking down the street, as you're with other people. It's available for absolutely everybody. There's no extra steps you need to take. You don't need to be, walking barefoot on hot coals for you to to show how serious you are. That's not it. It's literally about your belief. That's all. You're like, what? And in as much as I knew it, and understanding that other people are doing all these things to prove, you realize, no, I actually didn't need to. You didn't need to. There's no proving of anything. You can't prove your worth. As a matter of fact, you are such a sinner that you can't do anything. There's nothing you can do with your works that allows you or gives you access to this, I suppose, universe or this great force. So that was beautiful. That was one of the things I then said, okay, you know what, I actually really, really like this. It actually seems unfair when you look at all these other supposed religions and the Christian walk and how, quote unquote, easy to get in, quote unquote. Because I think I'm trying to explain, like, get in as if it's like a secret club, but ultimately it's just how to have that relationship. Yeah.
That is beautiful. And so how has this relationship with Christ impacted your identity and your sense of self?
That is a loaded question. How has it impacted my identity and my sense of self?
Yes.
I'll speak of two things.
Okay.
I will speak of my sense of self as a woman, and I'll speak of my sense of self as a creative. My sense of self as a woman, so I'm coming from a background of a broken home. And I realized that as I grew up, I had a very skewed understanding and relationship with men because of my skewed relationship with my father. And I had to, at some point in time, come to a realization of this and then try to work not reverse, but to work around that, to build a better relationship. Because what that then did is, I then saw that not only did I have a skewed relationship with just men in general, but also God as our Father. So that went into so many other spaces that I hadn't quite understood. So in my understanding of God as God the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, it was very interesting because I felt like I had a relationship with God, the Holy Spirit, and Jesus. But within that walk, so it's almost like I had just like split them up, and I was like, oh, these two make sense. And God the Father did not make sense at all. So I went through a journey of healing. And that happened in so many ways, that had so many layers, that had physical layers, that had spiritual, mental layers. Literally everything from watching YouTube videos and listening to podcasts by preachers, male and female preachers, who speak about what the role of men and women are in the world. So one person, for example, is Dr. Miles Monroe. His sermons helped so much in an understanding, because I was angry. I was so angry at being a woman, because I kept saying, well, this doesn't make any sense, God. It looks like we got the short end of the stick here. I don't see many women who are doing very well, or I see women who talk about how they love being women, but those are, say, exceptionally beautiful women who just get lots of attention from men. Not to say that I wasn't getting attention from men, but it seemed unfair, because what happens to everybody else? It just seemed like, no, man, there's a better way to go through life. Then that better way must be either by being a man or by being a woman who is not too womanly, because you are not just going to do well in this. So that had to change. That had to heal from literally understanding how God created us in Genesis as equal. Not one is more important than the other. But what we're meant to achieve and do is different. So in as much as you know these things, it's different when you're confronted and you have to get into it and start understanding, like, what does that mean for myself as an individual? And that helped how I viewed myself, how I viewed my relationship with God. And that started mending. To the point where it is now, where I really think I do have an amazing relationship with God as the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. One of the books that really helped, in as much as people have said a whole lot of things, I've heard people coming from two camps. Some people say they love it. The other group of people say it's absolutely heretical.
Heretical.
Is The Shack by Paul Young.
Yeah.
And you may say whatever you want to say about that book. For me, it was life-changing. It was life-altering. I don't know what other people got from it, but I know for myself, the depiction of God was exactly what I needed to understand how that is one person, but that is, I don't know, I'm not sure if I can even like fully explain what that is. So people usually say, oh, how dare he depict God the Father as a big black woman.
Mm-hmm.
But I understood what that was. I understood the need for a change within him as a person over how he viewed God, for God the Father to finally show himself as he did in the end. I understood that there was a need for mending of something. And it feels like it was the same thing for me. So let's put that aside. Let's put that aside. So yeah. Mm-hmm. So eventually, I feel like a lot was. I began enjoying being a woman. Mm-hmm. I began understanding that I didn't need to necessarily be a man or act like, which I hadn't realized I was like very. I sat in my what nowadays we call it the masculine energy. I really did, right? Right? There was a lot of anger within me. So I learned to let go of all of that and just be chill, just be soft and chill and accommodating. Not that I wasn't before, but I was actively fighting against certain very beautiful and sweet and kind and just pretty, I'll use that word, the pretty bits of myself. So I had to come back to that and say, actually, there's a time I was in a space of crisis. That's why I felt so angry and so combative, but I don't need to be. I can rest.
Yeah.
And that rest allowed me to just woosa, if I can use that word.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the one bit. And then in my career, that has been a very funny space.
Tell us.
So as I said, I studied art.
Yeah. And
I do believe it was really Christ-led for me to do that.
Okay.
Because it had never been my first choice. I was extremely creative, but I felt like, I'm going to be poor if I do this thing. So let me do something else. Funny thing is, all the universities I applied for something else kept saying, oh, I know you said art is like a third choice, but look how amazing your portfolio is. Why don't you just go study art? Literally, that was the rejection letter would say, yeah, but why don't you just do this? So eventually I was like, you know what? I think you're trying to say something to me, God. Let me go study this thing. Did I not hate it by the time I finished the degree?
You hated it?
I'm going to be so poor.
You hated it because you were afraid you're going to be poor? Or
I hated it because of what I thought I was going to get from it. So I thought I was going to just go and develop this artistic side of me. But now these people are teaching me to think. And not only that, but I really feel like in this bid to teach you to think, they don't really equip you with life skills.
Yeah.
Like outside of, I'm done with my 4 years and I've got an amazing honors degree. But how do I actually start making money with this thing? And it's not like I've gotten, say, for example, an accounting degree. I just go get a job as an accountant. You're an artist. No one employs you. So I struggled with that for a while. I really did. I really, really did. Because I just thought, oh my word, I should have just studied engineering or something like that. Why in the world would I do this? But God has a funny way of just changing the narrative and shifting certain ideas. So the first thing that happened is I got an internship and I went up to Paris to do that internship. And that opened up my mind. I was like, wait a minute, you can actually do this? I was looking at people who were who did other things within an art space. So whether it's the academics or the gallerists or the curators or the researchers, whatever it is. And I realized actually there is space for everyone in this thing. If you're artistically inclined, it may not necessarily mean that you need to physically be an artist. So I have worked as a curator and an art administrator since 2016 or so. I was curator of Tsoko Gallery. I've worked as an arts administrator for an artist studio that's based in the south of Spain. I have, or currently, I'm working with Chapungo Sculpture Park as like a little part-time thing because I'm never like fully employed. I offer my services to different spaces. So you do like the curation, the administration. I'm a researcher. I've written one or two articles. I've written, say, for the National Gallery. I've written for a German magazine. I've written for a South African magazine. So I found different expressions, or I found myself expressing myself in different ways within this art space, until I eventually then realized it's time now to get back to actually making art, or to get into, because I'm not sure if I ever fully got into making art, but to get into. And that was introduced or reintroduced to me in the form of, here's a mural, why don't you work on it? And I did. With a group of guys, I co-founded an organization called Post to the Arts Collective. And so we were invited to this art space to do this thing, and I was part of it. And I thought, but why am I not doing this? And from then, I then did another mural. Then I did another mural. Then I was like, okay, I think I need to get back to get, get into, I don't know, whatever the word you may use there, to get to doing this.
Yeah.
And so now I am, in as much as I do all my things in curating and writing and researching. I'm even renting a studio where I'm painting and creating, and within the next few months, it would be amazing for me to have. I plan on having an exhibition, which would be the very first outside of me exhibiting in school.
Wow, that's beautiful. Wow, that is impressive. I mean, I know a lot of people in the creative space often struggle with, making peace with their part, like understanding that this is what I'm supposed to do and I have to go all in this. And there's that pressure to have a job, a real job.
Yeah, it really, the pressure is there. Also because as a creative, you don't have something that is like, what's the word? You don't have a monthly salary, for example. And there's a lot of comfort in knowing that at the end of the month I'm getting something. But when you're doing this, when you're on this creative journey, you may not necessarily have that. If you're either offering a service or you are selling something, a product or whatever it is, then there's no guarantee that at the end of the month you're going to have money. I understand, I get it. So it's a very difficult path to walk, which is why we have the broke artist trope. Because you're very talented and you're very hardworking, but until you find yourself in the right space, you may really, really struggle. And that's not a struggle that I would wish upon anyone, to be honest. I think I even advise younger artists that, look, do this thing, explore, because in order for you to even find an artistic journey that rewards you in a monetary manner, you need the inputs, you need the resources. Where are you getting those? You can't chill at home painting, hoping someone buys the painting so that you can have money to buy materials. Have something that allows for you to eat and do the things you need to do. Have something, set something up. And then you can paint. Because, look, you don't need to paint every day all the time. Or whatever expression that is, or, sculpt, or whatever it is that you're doing. I'm a big advocate for that. Like, have it be well balanced. It will also allow you to not get tired too quickly. Because if you do that for a solid 6 months to a year, where you're asking people for money for stuff, I kid you not, you will look for a job as, I don't know, whatever it is, just so that you can get out. And I know many people who've done that. If they say, look, this is nonsense, I am going to do whatever it is. I'm taking or and then they completely leave this art thing, because it's very easy to get your heart broken within the creative space, because it does not quite reward you as you would imagine it should, especially not in this economy.
That was going to be my next question, actually.
Yeah.
What is it like as a young woman in the Zimbabwean art space?
In what way? Do you mean in like a financial way? Like in what way?
Perhaps in a financial way. We know that our arts and creative space is quite small. And it's hard to make us sustain yourself in this kind of environment, especially in an economy where things aren't set. There's no guarantee of anything. And so, what has it been like for you yourself personally, navigating yourself through that space?
Yeah, challenging.
Mm-hmm.
But I am grateful to God that I have had opportunities to. I found myself in very good spaces. I remember an artist friend of mine saying, Marilyn, he said it to Shana, like you just exist in a world of your own. Like why are you not complaining like other people complain about this art space? I could complain, quite frankly I could. Anyone could complain technically, but I choose not to. And at the same time, God has really led me to places that I would not have imagined, opportunities that I would not have imagined. I always tell him that I love his surprises. And I do love God's surprises because literally I'll have someone say, hey, so for example, like a few years ago, I ended up at the Johannesburg Art Fair, which I've been a few times, but I was working with a gallery from Nairobi. And how that happened is the director of the National Gallery, or rather the curator at that time, had said, I've got a friend who's based in Nairobi, and the person that they were supposed to bring to the Joburg Art Fair or take to the Joburg Art Fair couldn't get a visa. Would you mind helping? And I'm like, yeah. And they just paid for everything. And all I did was just like show up. And I was at the Sandton Convention Center where that takes place, just chilling with creators and artists and technically co-curating the booth for this particular Nairobi art space. That was God. Because someone literally came to me and told me this. I didn't go looking for it. I actually had sent an email to another gallery from Nairobi and they said, oh yeah, come work with us at the Joburg Art Fair. I was going to pay my way there. I was going to everything. But now I had to actually tell them, look, I can't do that anymore. I'm working with another space. That was God. So I've had so many instances where I've been sought out, or my services have been sought out by people I haven't even necessarily needed to apply to say I'm looking. It's very funny because now that I think of it, I think like 98% of things I've done is because someone has approached me and said,
oh wow, that is the grace of God. Wow.
Because I'm actually thinking now, what job have I actually properly applied for? They gave me a job.
Wow.
Yeah. So yes, that's how I have navigated that space through the grace of God, honestly, because
that is beautiful. Wow.
Yeah.
That is amazing. And so out of all of your achievements and your accomplishments, which one are you most proud of? And I don't mean proud of like, oh my gosh, I'm the GOAT, I got it going on. I mean proud of as in you look back and you think, wow, I actually did this. I actually took part in this.
That would be Soko Gallery. So when I joined Soko, they'd only done one exhibition. It was a very new space. They'd done one exhibition. And then I joined as the curator. And pretty much then did everything within the space. So whether it was planning exhibitions, getting in touch with everything that, the press releases. And I hadn't necessarily studied to be a curator. As a matter of fact, I'd gotten into a master's program that I was then unable to pursue. So I felt like I was under, that my qualifications were not enough for me to actually do that. And yet here I was with this entire gallery And I ran it for the next, I don't know, 2 years, 2.5 years, and I did very well. Of course, there were ups and downs. For example, I had this one exhibition where I showed an artist who was showing internationally, and I priced his work according to, say, Zimbabwean standards, so it was underpriced. This lady walks in who's, a big deal in the art space in Zimbabwe and internationally. She sees the underpriced work. She doesn't tell me that, you've done something wrong here. Instead, she goes and she calls a collector. A collector is like a buyer of art, fine arts, but usually very serious buyers. They're people who travel for art and really invest in the art space. And the whole thing ends up going to the gallerist that this artist was part of, as in the gallery that they worked with internationally. And there was a whole hullabaloo. Phone calls, emails. Oh, how dare you do this? And da da da. It was so scary because I didn't know I wasn't supposed to do that. I look back now and I'm like, at that time, it was so scary because all these big people in the art world and in America and in Europe there are calling me and saying these things, and I don't know because I don't have anyone teaching me these things as such. So I would say that's my biggest. No, not the biggest, but one of them. Let me say one of them, because I learned a lot and I grew up a lot, and it allowed me to see things about myself that I would not have imagined because I didn't necessarily have anyone practically or physically teaching me. I kind of had to just go at it alone. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That is like, what is it? Refinement by fire?
Yeah, by fire. Look, whether you're ready or not, this is happening. Hey, this is happening. Yeah.
Yeah. And so as we reach the end of this, just a final question. What would you say to someone who is trying to figure themselves out and their purpose out, and they don't quite have it together? What would you say to them?
Trust God. Talk to God. Sit with Him, have a chat about things. Tell Him what you want to do and do things. Because sometimes I think we wait for a big booming voice from heaven to tell us to do this and to do that. And it doesn't come that way. It's usually just it might not even be a whisper, to be honest. It might just be an inclination to do something. I just feel like I ought to do this. And then when you look back, you're like, wait a minute, that was me a year ago and look at what I'm doing now. One of the prayers I always make, literally a daily prayer for me, is, dear God, allow my path to meet with people who take me to my destiny. So sometimes you meet people without knowing and understanding that this meeting is what's going to take you to where you need to be. You sit, you have a chat with them, they'll remember you 6 months from now. Or they'll think of you, or something comes up, something happens. They're like, yeah, no, Merilyn does this. And whatever it is that you want to do, that you're thinking of doing, just do it. Just do it to the best of your ability, and you might be surprised at what happens or where that takes you. So, yeah, I know it was a very vague response. I can't exactly say there's one thing you need to do. Your identity or what you're supposed to be doing is found as you're doing stuff. I really do believe that if God was to come and tell you that you're going to be a millionaire, or you're going to be the biggest artist there is in Zimbabwe, or whatever it is that He's going to tell you, there's a whole journey there that if He told you about that journey, you'd say no, because that's going to be hard. You're going to be, say, if you're going to be in the creative industry, you will have moments where you're broke.
Yeah.
You're going to have moments where you're completely unsure and you're questioning each and everything that you're doing. You're going to have moments where family and friends are looking at you and saying, look, are you serious? You need to be serious with your life. And to be honest, I now see results. Now, this is from, let's say, 2016. How many years has it been now? Only now do I see results over things. So I get called for conversations. I get called for, let's say, to facilitate an entire discussion or to facilitate a residency, for example. And so I'm looking at myself like, well, these people trust that I know so much, or I'm competent enough in the things that they've been seeing me doing for the past few years, that they believe that I can actually do this thing for 5 days with young artists, or not even young artists, or just other artists, even established artists, and I know what I'm talking about. And that's a result of little things that might not seem cohesive, right? But now that I look at it, it makes sense. So I have. Oh, I wasn't going to tell you this, but anyway, I mentioned a little bit earlier, but I have a platform. So I've got this one platform, and what that is a platform where I talk about art, and I link that to social issues. So it's called a twist of art. So I talk about pretty much anything and everything, but with a twist of art. And with a twist of art.
Of course.
But one of the things I realized is, so I created this platform, and as I was putting things together, I realized that when I look at things on paper, it does make sense. But when I think to myself of what I've been doing for the past few years, it doesn't seem to make sense. I'm not even fully sure what to call myself sometimes. Should I call myself a curator? But no one really employs me as a curator. I told myself that I was a curator. Literally. I currently have an exhibition showing at the National Gallery, so please go have a look at it. From now till September.
Okay,
so
girl.
different exhibitions.
We got you. We got you.
I had to give myself that title, like art administrator or researcher or writer. So sometimes when I'm asked exactly what I do, I'm kind of like curator, because I feel like that just encompasses everything. But sometimes it might not. But I have to call myself something, don't I? I can't just say I'm a creative. And other little projects. So anyway, when I then look at this thing on paper and see the different things, it's quite cohesive on paper. But in my head, it didn't feel like it was cohesive.
It wasn't making sense.
It was not making sense. It feels like I was just blindly trusting God. I was like, well, you said I must do this. Okay, sharp. I'm working on this thing, and they say I must come to Spain. Okay, sharp. So, but I was like, okay, what exactly am I doing? Is it tangibly cohesive? But it doesn't need to be, actually. Yeah.
Good question.
Does it need to be? Does it? Do you need to have like a solid title, like you are a accountant, full stop? But
no.
Why? You don't, really, because that's where the entire conversation and question on what your identity is, because then you don't allow spaces and people to tell you that. So I'll come back to the accountant thing. If someone says I'm an accountant, the next thing people think is, so you're stingy with money. Because apparently that's what accountants do.
That's a stereotype.
Stereotype, right? But you don't have to then be defined by those spaces. So if I get into a place, I may not necessarily start by telling people that I'm an artist. Because is that all I am, really? Because artists don't necessarily behave the same as curators and researchers. But I actually am all of those. So,
Love it.
Yeah.
It just reminds me of this thing someone once said, where if God showed you the whole plan from beginning to the end, would you still go on that journey?
Yeah, probably not.
Probably not.
It's going to be hard. Because it is already.
Yeah.
But once again, you step out. When you look at yourself from the outside, I really feel like so many times we underestimate ourselves as individuals. I feel like people are more convinced of you and what you do than yourself. And a lot of times, especially in such industries as the creative industry, you step out and you're like, oh, wow, that's pretty dope. But within it, I'll give you an example. Tell me if I'm talking too much, though.
No.
You'd say it as we're closing up, so I'm not.
Go ahead.
I'll give you an example. So I'm working with a particular media team, and I'm doing their research and, their whatever stuff. And so they have recordings on one day, and I've invited all these creatives to talk at different times. But what ends up happening is we are late with one recording. So we've got the two people from the first one, the two people from the next one, and then the third recording, those people got there super, super early. So we ended up with like 6 different people supposed to be recording 3 different episodes. But what was so exciting and so funny about the space is how they kept complimenting each other.
Wow.
Oh, your work is amazing. I've seen your Instagram. I've seen this. I've seen what you do as a content creator. I've seen what you do as a model. I've seen what you do as this. And it was so funny because each and every one of them thought the other person was better.
Wow.
or they had a better platform, or they were doing amazing work. And it's almost like they did not recognize what they were doing as being amazing work. And they were surprised when the other person told them that their work was amazing. And I feel like it's a thing with creatives. You're just doing, and yes, some people believe in it, but I think it's difficult for you to fully believe or solidly understand what you're doing. And you kind of get that when someone else then says it. So that was funny for me to find these 6 different creatives, all of them sort of in awe of the other ones, but also almost even wondering why they're here with the other 5. But the other 5 feel like, wow, your work is amazing. So, yeah.
Wow, that is interesting. That is very interesting.
It was a lot more interesting in person as well to actually see it happening, you know.
I guess that is true. I mean, if you're an artist, you can never really hold your work up to that standard.
You always have better. You know there's better to be achieved.
Yeah.
You know it. You know it. So, yeah. With time. With time.
Thank you so much, Merilyn. I mean, this was a very insightful conversation we had, and wow, you are just so full of wisdom.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me here. It's been fun, a lot of fun.
Thank you. And so we have reached the end of the podcast. Until next time, goodbye.